Let me welcome you first to Tallinn and Estonia, Adam.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's first time in Tallinn.
But it wasn't the first time when we asked you to come here. First time it was when we prepared a huge program, Estonian Republic 100.
Oh, yes.
And we gave, we got this support, 9.3 million, to do some extra films for Estonian film industry. And then we also included a TV series. And then we wanted you to come and help us to make the best possible TV series there are in the world. Unfortunately, yes, we didn't get hold of you at the time. And, time was very precious at the time. And then we asked Steen known scriptwriter for TV series. The best known TV series is obviously Borgen, but we are going to also talk about Ride Up in the Storm. And then we talk a little bit about the Borgen's fourth series.
Yeah.
And then we end up in Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, also, yes.
But perhaps we start, you have a quite a remarkable history. You're actually, your ancestors came to Denmark from Britain, and therefore your name comes from your British ancestors.
Exactly, yes. Price is not a Danish name. It's obviously from the UK, but it's several generations ago. We actually come from... Well, the first Price they can find was a pub owner. I have to say that I'm also a restaurateur in Denmark. And the first Price we know of was a pub owner, and he entertained people in his restaurant. So what has actually happened in 300 years in my family? Not much, basically. But they traveled through Europe and they settled in Denmark. And basically, my family, they have been artists of various sorts for, almost 300 years. So they have been, pantomime artists, they have been circus artists, clowns, musicians, singers, dancers, opera singers, actors. So basically, there's one thing that connects us all, that we relate to an audience. We tell stories for an audience, and the stories can be told in numerous ways. We can dance them, or some sang them and others wrote them. So basically we address an audience, we entertain. We're in the entertainment business, and we've always been that.
And your father was a theatre director.
My father, I'm actually a second generation immigrant in Denmark, because my grandfather didn't know a word of Danish. Actually, he worked quite a lot in the Baltics, and also France. So he was a traveling circus artist, and he stopped briefly in Copenhagen because he needed a dancer for a circus act. And he met my grandmother, and the rest is history. So they basically had a child, my father, and my grandfather left quickly, and then my father was brought up as a lonely child by a single mother in Copenhagen. They were super poor, and one thing she knew, that she wanted to put him in ballet school because there were ancestors that were dancers, and so we had some kind of connection with the Royal Ballet School. So she put him in ballet school, and he was kicked out when he was 14 because he was not good enough, and he looked French and foreign, and most Danes back then, they were blonde and white-skinned, and he was much more, he looked like a French or Italian. So they thought, no, we can't use you. It was also too short, and everything was wrong. And he went sailing for a couple of years, and then he got back, went into acting school, and actually got into acting school and became a quite famous actor and director for all his life. So I grew up with him and my mother, who was also an actress. So it was, a theatrical family. And they also did TV series and film, not writing, but acting in them. So basically, I grew up in this business.
But you have a brother.
I have a brother, a lovely big brother, who is a composer and a conductor. And we have worked together. We have also written 6 musicals together. So I also work in the musical theatre. Because it's in the blood, always been. I've always been extremely fond of music. So I also work with music, but I work from the lyric side of music. So I set words to music, basically.
But you also run the restaurants together with your brother, with Jess.
Yes, I know it sounds strange. It sounds like a person who really doesn't know how to decide which business to be in. But if you wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and ask me what I do, I would say that I'm a writer. I write TV series. I write for film, TV, and theatre. But my father also had a side career. He was kind of an amateur chef. And he wrote recipe articles for glossy magazines. That was kind of a strange side career. So he was known as a bon vivant. He loved the good life and loved wine and wonderful food. And that was a side career to his theatrical career. And he passed that on to us because, I mean, we ate extremely well. So I got to write about food when I was very young, and I became a restaurant critic. So I actually spent my time, some of it anyway, reviewing restaurants. And my brother also wrote about food. So at one point, about 15 years ago, so I mean, I had a good career going in film and TV. We actually sent in a program proposal to do a new cooking show for Danish National Broadcasting, DR, the same company as produced all
Borgen.
the series we're going to talk about, except Ragnarok, of course. And they said yes. We actually didn't think that we would be on air, on screen. We just thought we would be part of the research team for a new cooking show. But they listened to our strange story and this old weird family of artists and people that were amateur chefs, and they said, well, you know, you host it, guys. And we thought that we would only be given one season. Basically, it would be seen by a few friends and family and just be too goddamn weird to continue. But it turns out that people liked it because we were not trained chefs, but we were anyway very much in love with cooking, and we enjoy being together so much. So we had a brother thing, a teasing and something going there, and lots of stories about food. And now we've just been shooting our 15th season, so it's insane. So a lot of people in Denmark actually know me. Possibly more my face anyway, because I'm frequently on national TV in prime time cooking. I know it sounds weird because this is what I came to talk about. So let's talk about that.
So
I can give you a recipe later.
So how do we build the bridge between cooking host and the TV series? If you were already in DR2?
Yeah, well, you know, back then when I began as a writer, when I was a young writer, I didn't do the cooking show at all. I was actually writing about food, and I began to review restaurant around the same time. Basically, I thought that I was supposed to be a lawyer because
You studied law.
I studied law, and we had kind of a big figure in our family who was my grandfather on my mother's side, and he was quite a successful lawyer. And a very important figure in the family, and I thought, well, I could also do that. And my parents, they were kind of applauding me. Oh yes, be the first one with a proper education, please do. So I began studying law at university, but at the same time, my brother, who's 8 years older than I am, he began to work with my parents. So every time we were sitting at home, even though my brother and we lived in our own apartments and stuff, when we met in the family home, they were always talking about interesting projects they had together, and I was sitting there listening to them, and I thought, hey, why do they get to play together and I have to go back and study business law? I mean, how boring is that? So after a few years, you know, I actually financed my studies writing little pieces for the theater. Sometimes I would write something for TV. We have a very popular theatrical form in Denmark that we called revue. It's like, I think in the UK they would call it pantomimes. they're not pantomimes in the classical sense that it's anything to do with dancing. It's actually kind of a variety show where we do comic stuff about politicians and things in society and trends and funny songs, and it's extremely popular. It takes place during summer, and I would write to a lot of those shows, and my brother would do the music. So I actually financed my university studies, writing little bits and pieces to many different genres. And that was perhaps a very good way of getting into the business, because I just wrote whatever was there as a job. You know, I said, well, hey, I can write that, and I can write that, because I still thought I was going to be a lawyer. And then when I was 23, I was given a chance to, actually I was given a contract for half a year, writing for actually also a satirical political show. Something a bit like, you know, Saturday Night Live. So a weekly show where you would write during the week. Extremely good training for a young writer, because you just do output. I mean, every day you do 2 sketches, or 2 sketches and a song, or something like that. And nobody asks you if you can deliver, because you just bloody hell deliver. I mean, every day, because the actors are there and they're going to shoot it tomorrow. You know, it's a really good training, because in this business, sometimes we spend half a year writing on our project, and oh, is it good enough? And we're so insecure, and we show it to someone. No, you don't want to see it. No, and this is just give it to me, because I'm going to do it now. I'll do it now. It's not something we talk about. I just do it. You know, it's like that. It was very good training. So I was standing there and watching, oh, am I going to study law? Am I going to write? Am I going to sign this contract? And I bloody signed it. But I was very much in doubt what was going to be my career. But looking back, I had been writing professionally since I was 19. Basically financing my university studies, but also just, you know, having fun with my brother and doing a few things together with my parents. And which was a very normal thing, you know, in our, if you go back in my family history, the circus family, you know, when kids were old enough, they brought them on stage immediately, because, I mean, there were mouths to feed, and you bloody well take part in the family business. You come on, you're 5 years old. We'll bring you on stage. What the hell, you know? It's like that. So so I guess it was kind of the family trend in an old circus artist family. Hey, just bring the kids. Whatever. We'll see if they can entertain. If not, we'll kick them out. So I had worked together with them. I signed this contract, and I was basically, for the first time, 100% professional in the business, and I never turned back. But my law studies has helped me a lot. Also writing Borgen, actually, very much.
So how do we reach to the TV series?
Well, then I wrote various kinds of TV for a few years, satirical stuff, humorous stuff, scenes for things here and there. Then DR, the Danish National Broadcasting Company, they wanted to do a new TV show, and they wanted to do it in a different way, because they had sent producers to the United States to study how the Americans do it. And now we are back in the early 90s. And DR had very tough years with a very low success rate, so it was not going well for them. And they sent some people over there to study the Americans, and they came back and said, hey, the Americans, they have a system. They have a one writer, one vision. They have this writer's room system, and they do it in a special way, and they write and they shoot at the same time, and the writer is God, you know, the writer just gets to decide everything. And I said, oh, the writer's God. Sounds like
I like it.
No, and then I got to be an apprentice writer. They had a new TV show going called Taxa in Danish, which was about a taxi company. It's basically a show taking place in central Copenhagen. It was a character-driven show. It was about, you know, a taxi company. And that was the first thing where I wrote as a staff writer. I was 27. And I just began, and I really got, it was kind of a writer's academy for me, because I don't have a formal education in writing. I actually learned it by people that knew how to do it, you know? So I've learned the craft from masters of the craft. And that is, you know, an old way of learning a craft. The way we centuries ago learned how to become carpenters and artists of various sorts. We would look over the shoulder of someone that really knew how to do it, and basically learn it that way.
Was there one of the first shows, Nikolaj and Julie?
Yeah, after the Taxi show, then they said to me, "Well, you are a young writer. You're turning 30 now, and why don't you write something about your generation?" And then I began a new show, and I decided to call it Nikolaj and Julie. And it was, a romantic comedy, like a dramedy. It had this constant humor. Not a laugh track and traditional comedy stuff from the short comedy series. This had a full drama format, but it was still in the same family as a show like Ally McBeal
or Cold Feet.
Cold Feet, exactly. So inspired by the new dramedy, you could say, genre coming from both the United States and the UK. And so I began writing that show. And then I was offered to become head of drama for TV2 Denmark. So the other competing channel. I was saying, oh, hey, that's an interesting job, because I might also want to have some experience leading a department. That was interesting. So I decided to say yes. And then I passed on the show to my great friend and colleague, Søren Sveistrup, who ended finishing the show and making a brilliant show out of it. And the show won the Emmy, and everything was amazing. And now I have a company together with Søren. So I mean, we met so many years ago in basically writing the Taxi show together. Then we wrote Nikolaj and Julie together, and now we have a company together. So lovely brotherhood story.
But perhaps, yes, this, we have to consider what happened in the Danish TV at the time. And then I think we are approaching to the time when this kind of Nordic noir kicked in. And actually it was a show before Borgen what actually made it.
Very much, yes. So I wrote I was head of drama for TV2. That I ended that period writing a show for TV2, which was the first and only crime show I've ever done, a show called An Appeal, which actually ran for 3 seasons and was quite successful for TV2. And then I was asked by DR to come home to home base, where I was trained as a writer many years earlier, and I said to them, I would like to write a show about politics. So I made the worst pitch in my career. I said, I would like to write a show about Danish coalition politics. They just looked at me and said, now that is a really bad idea. You go home, you think it over, you try to put some finesse over this idea, you try to make it concrete, you actually make it doable, and then come back and pitch it again. And then I did. I had a couple of months where I was trying to hammer the show in place. And then I got back to them and actually pitched what became Borgen.
And you have it standing on the 3 pillars: politics, civil servants, and media.
Yeah, exactly. So I basically, of course, you want to know with a new show, you want to find your controlling idea. Basically, you want to know. That's what they will always ask you. I'm sure you have asked in your position, young writers, that 1,000 times. What are you actually trying to say? That is a typical way of actually pushing off projects. So what are you really trying to say? So of course I was trying to find out what I was going to say. And I had this, I know I've told this story many times, but still I'll just repeat it briefly because it was actually very meaningful to me. Now, my drive to write Borgen was actually that my generation in Denmark had been accused of being non-political, especially by my parents' generation. The generation that were young around 68. because they kind of thought or decided that they had done the revolution, both in Denmark, also in other countries in Europe, so to speak. They had brought women into in good jobs. They had changed society completely. They had protested against the Vietnam War, and they had become hippies and changed society, you know. And they thought that we were basically, in a nice way, but also in a bit parental way, looking at us and saying, you are in a way, you know, the parasites of our revolution. Which was a really nasty thing to say. And also they said, you don't really have a political project because we done it all for you. You know, that's what they said. And I thought, what the hell? I said, my generation, we also have something political to say. So I needed to kind of make it clear to me, what was I actually trying to say? And then one day, I was standing in my fitness room together with a very big muscular guy, fitness center, and we were both naked. It adds to the story, and he was big and muscular and tattooed all over. And at the same time, chance came by, and actually it was the day where our former Prime Minister, Mr. Anders Fogh Rasmussen, actually announced the election, the general election in Denmark. So the news were on the TV in the training center, and we were standing there watching the news. And the Prime Minister said there will be a general election in 3 weeks. And this big guy standing next to me said the beautiful sentence, "Fuck, count me out," and then he just left. And I thought, this is interesting, because I grew up with very, very strong images of political struggle. Being a young man from Denmark, I actually grew up with the students' uprising on the Tiananmen Square in Beijing, the falling of the Berlin Wall, and then also the appearance of new democracies like the Baltics, like your beautiful country. Those very strong images of people actually fighting for the chance to vote, you know, basically your basic democratic rights that some people never had in their lives. This was so important to me. And I just thought, standing next to this guy, you know, I'm living in a very privileged democracy. Like for 170 years, we've had free democracy in Denmark, or kind of a democracy in Denmark anyway. And we are so privileged that this guy doesn't even want to vote. He doesn't really bother, you know. And in an election, people elsewhere in the world, they're ready to die for it because they really want the chance to decide who is to decide over them. And I thought, this is it. Borgen, it needs to, I didn't know it was called Borgen at the time, but I said, this show is going to be, I want to write a show that will make this big guy vote. That was my idea, basically. If I can make this man vote, then I've done something.
So you came up with a female prime minister.
Yeah, then I thought, well, hey, I'm going to write a show. It needs to be idealistic. It needs to be a tribute to democracy, for good and bad, but it needs to be a tribute to democracy, because democracy in Denmark actually works. You might not like the politicians, the odd politicians, you might not like them, but the Danes, they believe in the system. They believe so much in the system. And if you look at the beautiful list by this company called Transparency International, that every year assesses the level of corruption in the world, super interesting list. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, they're usually competing about the 4 best seats in that club, you know? So the system works in our countries. And the further down you go on that list, the more corruption there is. The more corruption there's on every level of society. And that's why in Denmark, it works. We need to pay tribute to it. I think it's super important, and we need to be proud of that. So Borgen became this show that was a tribute to democracy, for good and bad. And as you said, I then decided to do 3 characters. One main politician who was to have the most of the show, so about perhaps 40 to 50% of the action would be around that character. And then the journalist and then the civil servant. Because you could say that the political system in Denmark and in many countries rests on these three columns, basically. You have the political column, you have journalists, and civil servants. And naturally, it's interesting because these three people are actually trying to control each other. So the politician needs to be controlled, so believes the civil servant or the spin doctor. Basically, he believes that he has to control the politician. The politician doesn't want to be controlled, but wants to be advised. And the spin doctor wants to control the journalist as well, because the journalist wants to expose the politician. So you have this interesting dynamic between the three main characters, and that became the energy of the Borgen show. And it still is now, with the fourth season just coming out. It's still that same energy. I mean, you have this basically magnetism, electromagnetism of these three poles that constantly ignite each other and send energy impulses to each other, and people react to the impulses from each other, and that is the driving force of Borgen.
We have to reach to this ride up into a storm at some point,
Okay, yeah,
but I wanted to ask you, I think it's very interesting also that you chose to apart from this political theme of the Borgen, there is also the female classical model and the male classical model of your understanding. And there was also a clash, that we think that women have to do certain things and can't do other things, and men, we are also used for centuries being able to do more than we allow women to do.
Yes, I mean, I think part of the success of Borgen was actually that we have a female lead who is also the prime minister. At the time in Denmark, writing the first couple of episodes, we hadn't had a female prime minister. We've had many women in politics, but we hadn't specifically had a female prime minister. And that was part of the good luck, the good fortune of Borgen, that 3 months after we had our premiere and our first episode and the show was running, Helle Thorning-Schmidt actually won the election and became the very first prime minister. So we got this image of, we got a reputation that we had a crystal ball, that we knew what was going to happen in politics. And of course, we don't. It is absolutely preposterous. We don't know anything. But we try to pick topics that are big and have longevity, basically. That's what we're trying to do. Because writing a show like Borgen, we are 2 years behind. So when we conceive an episode, it takes about a year to write a full season, and it takes a year to shoot a full season. So when episode 1 is being written, it will be 2 years until it's actually broadcast. So, I mean, that span is completely impossible to fathom. What will happen in politics. You don't know. I mean, you basically have to say we pick big topics always, something that lasts, and we do our very best to make it as relevant as possible to the characters, because that will, if we love the characters, then that relevance will spill out, hopefully, into the audience, and it will become relevant to them because they like the characters. That was my own emotions when I saw a show like the famous old beautiful Aaron Sorkin show, The West Wing, which is now very dated. I mean, because having seen Trump in action and then going back to seeing, President Bartlett played by Martin Sheen speaking Latin to God, there is kind of a gap there, I don't think Trump knows Latin. I don't think he knows God. So anyway, it's just... but the thing with a show like The West Wing, sometimes they dealt with very specific maneuvers between the Senate and the House of Representatives and special rules and regulations that you didn't know as a European, that I didn't know, even though I was a fan of the show. But I loved CJ, I loved Sam Seaborn, I loved those characters so much. So if it was important to them, it was important to me. Even though I didn't know what they were actually trying to do always, I was just thinking, I hope they will win. I didn't understand the specific necessarily. Some of the details in the are very, very specific in American politics. But hey, I loved the characters, so I loved whatever the projects Sorkin would give them.
But how did you, three guys, came up with this kind of perfect prime minister's character? Idealistic in the beginning, but then obviously it starts to develop. But there are men who wrote this character.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We happened to be three men, and I, of course, at the time joked with we were three men writing the primary feminist project of DR, which was funny to say, especially. But I mean, I think because Denmark at the time, and still, if you compare us to the rest of the world, not necessarily Estonia, but if you look at big old countries like France and Germany and the UK, we still seemed very progressive in the interactions between professional women and professional men. It seemed to them that we were a bit more advanced than they were. So I think they really loved the show also because of that, because it seemed like women were more free in their choice of whatever career move they wanted to have, and that was very important in the show. So I think we got a lot of the reputation and people loved the show because of that as well, because it seemed progressive to them when they saw it. And naturally, it was important for me that to have a female prime minister, because, like you hinted in your question, that we had seen so many men as politicians in many shows. We actually hadn't had in Danish television a show like Borgen, because we hadn't really had a really political show. But I think it also helped the reputation of the show that we had this female prime minister who basically lost everything, trying to be the best prime minister. She lost so much along the way. And I thought it was interesting to see a woman trying to fight her way through her days in politics, and at the same time trying to be a mother, trying to be a wife, trying to make her universe stick together, and that was different than writing a man doing the same, because we had seen a lot of, especially foreign shows with men in politics that basically just let down their families. I mean, never saw their kids, were unfaithful to their wives, and basically just destroyed everything around them. That was a well-known story. We'd seen that in many shows. So I wanted something different. I wanted to see the struggle of a modern woman in that part.
I think you have said also that you wanted to show something realistic, but this was one of the key.
Definitely, and we the show came out of DR, Danish National Broadcasting Company, which is a very political institution in Danish society as such. It's really a very often heavily criticized institution, because like many other public service channels in many European countries, it has often been accused of being leftish, being a bit against certain politicians and having its own agenda. So when I actually pitched Borgen and they said yes, they said at the same time, balance. Don't offend anyone too much. I mean, write what you want, but try to balance. And it was important to me actually to choose a politician in the middle of the parliament, basically having to work with both the right wing and the left wing constantly. That was part of the mechanics of the show, because the show had been very different if I had placed her politically at either end of the political spectrum. Then it would have been like, oh, she is extremely red and has to work around that, or she is extremely blue and has to work around that. It was much more also actually reflecting on how Danish politics very often works. And I mean, these very minutes in Denmark, the former prime minister, now acting prime minister, Mette Frederiksen, is trying to form a government over the middle of Danish politics, actually trying to bridge the gap between the Social Democratic Party and the Liberal Party, which is a very difficult task. It looks as if it will be successful. Even a lot of people already hates the new government. But hey, we're here to hate the government, aren't we? Yeah.
But from politics, perhaps we do jump to your second very big subject you like to deal with, what is religion.
Yeah, religion.
And, before we start to talk about it, we watch a little clip from the show called Ride Up on the Storm.
Ride Upon the Storm.
The first clip, please.
God is great.
Which God? Yours or mine?
Just God, my friend.
Livets store mystik. Længslen mod en elsket. Kærligheden til et barn. Eller den hjælp, du pludselig får, når du mister fodfæstet. Alt det indgår i Guds navn. I Faderen, Sønnen og Helligånden. Og alt i det tror jeg på.
Din familie er lidt mere troende, end vi er.
I hvert fald præster 250 år tilbage.
Du er en fantastisk præst. Du er fornyelsen.
Har du nogensinde mødt nogen, du ikke gjort godt indtryk på?
Det hele det kommer. Det regner bare ned over dig helt af sig selv.
Ja, så du ham den anden, der intet har.
God tur til de høje bjerge. Kunne være, du kom tættere på Gud.
Han er 30 år gammel og har ikke bedrevet en skid. Intet.
Du skal ikke fortælle mig, at jeg ikke må elske mine børn, medmindre de præsterer. I det her hus, der er man nødt til at holde tingene adskilt. Der er rum, hvor jeg kan skrige, og der er rum, hvor jeg er præstefrue.
Fader vor, du som er i himlen. Helliget vorte dit navn. Komme dit rige. Ske din vilje. Der findes ingen synd, som ikke kan tilgives. Lev med det! I den her familie, der ligger vi os ikke ned.
This was a huge jump from politics to religion.
Yes, it was a huge thing, but I thought after politics, it has to be religion. Has to be difficult. It has to be big. And religion has always puzzled me. And I think it's very important to write with a very strong emotion for your subject. I mean, because writing a television show and being the creator of a television show, it demands so much time, so much painstaking hours. I mean, writing, correcting your errors, writing, editing, sitting in the editing room, discussing with the actors, and constantly being challenged in your ideas from, heads of drama, institute heads, and that's their job. I mean, I've had jobs like that. I mean, we all just try to make the best possible show, and it demands a lot of hours, and it demands a lot of questions and a lot of challenges. And I think writing on a very strong emotion is important, because I mean, if you just pick a subject, like, oh yeah, you're going to write something, well, just pick anything. Do you want to write about love or a crime, or would you? You can waver too much if you don't believe strongly in what you are writing. You really need to find that controlling idea, that that holds part of your voice, basically as a writer. If not, you will be too easy to push, you know. And it's so important to, you know, it's important to be able to bend. But if you are just basically a movable object, and anybody that has an opinion about your work can make you change it, that's not good either. So you need to find a core that you really believe in, and a strong idea and a strong controlling idea that you really feel as a writer. And in Borgen, I was driven, just like I said before, I was driven by this. Hey, you're not supposed to tell me that I don't have any political identity, and that I'm just a parasite on my parents' revolution. And when it came to religion here in Right Upon the Storm, it was super important for me to try and understand religion, because I think if you look back 25 years, we've had almost, and if you look back 2,500 years, we've had so much evil because of religion. I mean, we've had religion. You can say that it's a beautiful force when you see it as a pure belief in a person, but the numbers of lives that religion actually has on its conscience, you know, is staggering. It's staggering what it has demanded of wars in this world. And basically, we're talking about believing in something that we cannot scientifically prove is there. That is basically the core of it, which is a super interesting. I mean, it is one of the oldest philosophical discussions in the world, but it's never ending. You know, if you are a true believer and I'm an atheist, then we can discuss forever, because you can never prove that your God exists, and I can never disapprove that he or she doesn't exist. So we will discuss forever. But that is a very strong feeling in me, that I wanted to try and understand religion, because I was also very angry with religion, because I could see all the terrible things it had done. And I mean, in the wake of 9/11, but 9/11 is then again an expression of both something political but also something religious. And I am also a child of the never-ending Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and that is again possibly a reflection of an even older conflict that goes back to the Crusades. And I mean, it's never-ending. We kill because we believe. So I needed to understand religion, and that became that show.
But it was a lot about faith, isn't it? You know, strong faith, more than about this Church of Denmark or.
Oh yeah. It's about faith, personal faith in the characters, and then it is a brother story. So something completely different than Borgen, a classical brother story. And naturally, when we talk about religion, and at the core of it is, of course, a constant discussion of the Christian faith. Even though we also touch upon Judaism and Islam, the core of the story is very much a Christian story. And naturally, a brother story, one of the first stories in the Bible is a tragic brother story, Cain and Abel. So I mean, there are so many symbols you can draw in, so many stories that holds great symbolic value. And I tried, of course, to mix that in the dough at all times.
And Lars Mikkelsen became religious after playing the lead character.
Well, it was an amazing dance with Lars, who is possibly the most demanding actor I've ever worked with. And then again, Caesar is very demanding, and so is Birgitte Hjortsø. They're also bloody demanding, but they're amazing, and I guess that's why they want something with their art, and that demands them to question every line they have, and I love them for it, even though it means very long hours. So Lars is an amazing actor to work with, and he's never finished with the text. I mean, at the end, he says something, and most of it probably is something I've written. Some of it he has written himself at the very last minutes before saying the words, and some of the words maybe just come to him, you know. It's an amazing way of working. It's very stressful both for him and for me and for everyone else. But I think, I mean, I cannot applaud him enough for that role and what he did with it, and he very deservingly won the Emmy for his role. And yes, Lars, his personal story was actually that he grew up in a home where communism and very hardcore socialism was the main thing for that family, and religion was basically, almost to quote Lenin, the opium of the people, and we are not the people. We believe in socialism. But slowly, I think that he took in faith, maybe not just Christian faith, but also spiritualism. And you're absolutely right. Midpoint in shooting Ride Upon the Storm, he actually made that huge decision of being baptized. So one of his mentors, one of the priests that he actually studied with, because he is such a he believes so much in doing a proper job, you know. So he constantly prepares, and looks for, where can I become even better? Where can I know this? I have to constantly prepare myself and research. So he went to several priests, and one of them is a very great figure in cultural life of Denmark, and he baptized him midpoint of us shooting this story. And I mean, how far can you go in method acting? I really applaud him for that amazing step, and I'm sure that he has made, if not peace with God, then they have arrived at a good point in their chess game where they can both kind of get out of it.
But since the time is passing so fast,
sorry,
talking to you, no, it's great.
It's because I say so much, sorry.
But it's good, you know, with the character, and I don't think many Estonians actually have seen this. It has been maybe only once here in a public broadcasting, but very short time. And when I tried to find the show again, then it was very hard to watch it. But you know, from this show, you moved again back to the Borgen, and then we see a totally different prime minister.
Yes.
Nyborg has really changed.
She has changed, and I think it's also very important that if you take on the task of actually reinventing, reinvigorating an old show that I thought I'd written my last episode, put it aside. Actually, when the idea for this new season of Borgen came along, I didn't even know it was supposed to be Borgen. I actually heard from a friend of mine who's an active politician in Denmark, and who used to be the foreign minister of Denmark. And he actually said to me, do you know there's an interesting law guarding the relationship between Greenland and Denmark? You might just want to read that law, because it holds some interesting facts that most people don't know. And I read it, and the law actually has a paragraph saying that if something of extreme value is ever found in Greenland, it is up to negotiations between the government of Denmark and the government of Greenland to basically divide the riches. Now that is a direct invitation to conflict, you know. It is the beautiful, dramatic what-if question, you know. What if something of extreme value is actually found in Greenland? Who's going to get it, you know? Are we going to let the Greenlandic people have it because it's actually theirs? Or would there be people in Denmark who says, well, you know, there are only 56,000 people and we're actually 5.5 million, so hey, give us some, you know? And it could be a great conflict. So I actually began to work with that as an idea for a political thriller. I didn't know it was supposed to be Borgen at that time. Then Netflix came along, and they really, the Netflix bosses, very much like the old show Borgen. And they asked me, could you ever write a new season of Borgen? And I said, I hold the writer's rights, but I don't hold the format rights. Those belong to DR, National Broadcasters of Denmark. And then we actually managed to get them together, around a table. And that is pretty crazy because it's, Denmark, DR, that is old, almost old Stalinistic planned economy. And then you have the free imperialistic market forces of Netflix. But they actually got together a budget, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's worth a separate open class, to talk about putting Netflix together with DR.
Exactly. But then, I thought we should not just go back. And now we had a budget and we actually said, yes, we're going to do a new season of Borgen. And we're going to do a new season that deals with this Greenlandic, old, interesting colonial issues of Denmark, which brings a lot of bad conscience and a lot of emotions. And it's always good. As many emotions as possible in the plot, then you're all right, or you can be all right anyway. So, but I could also see that I didn't want to just go back and write 10 new episodes of Birgitte Nyborg as she was 10 years ago. I thought we have to make the years past part of our story. That's absolutely vital. So she's 10 years older. She has moved into her early 50s. She's in the middle of menopause. She has a different relationship with her kids. They are grown up. They are studying, and she doesn't have a daily contact with them. And she doesn't have a boyfriend anymore. She doesn't have a lover in her life. She's all alone. And she has this, she has invested everything in her political position. And that was basically, you could say, part of the controlling idea for the new fourth season of Borgen. To go even further into our old controlling idea, which was the question, can you remain in power and still remain true to yourself? Now we go even further because she invests everything in her position. And I would claim that that is very dangerous for a politician to do that. Because then your position, meaning your power, basically your political seat, your seat as a minister in the government, it becomes too important to you. It becomes far too important. Because if you don't have anything else, if you don't really have friends in your life, if you don't really see your kids, if you don't have any person you love and you see and that has nothing to do with your professional life, then you are investing everything. You are investing your soul in this project. And then it becomes too difficult for you to leave. And that's the kind of politicians we should fear,
But most of them are like this.
No, they're not. I don't think you're right. Maybe they are in this country. I wouldn't know. But I'm just saying, but I wouldn't say that. I would actually say that we do have politicians. Naturally, if a politician gets power, that politician will use that power. And we should not be kind of afraid to talk about that because politicians want power. That is not a bad thing in itself. If you don't want power and you're a politician, why are you in politics? You can't do anything without power. But if you invest too much in your power position, then you're not able to leave it. And then corruption or negative feelings about this power will eventually begin to move you in mysterious ways. And look at politicians. Look at politicians in Europe. Look at Viktor Orban in Hungary. I'm sure he once was just a politician that wanted to change the world.
Ideal. He had ideas.
I'm sure he had ideals. Now his main ideal is to remain in power and trying to remove everything that can ever take his power away from him. And that is when power becomes something that makes you sick as a person. And that poses a great challenge to Europe, if you're talking about Viktor Orban. But when you're talking about the fictional Birgitte Nyborg, we definitely take her to the end of the line in this new season because she wants to keep that power more than anything in the world. And that makes her darker than we've ever seen her before.
Shall we watch the second trailer then?
Yeah.
Det som om, at stormen omkring Birgitte Nyborgs person ikke rigtig vil lægge sig.
Det er også begyndt at ulme internt i hendes eget parti.
Så tæt på et tidspunkt. Er Nyborg simpelthen en anden politiker, måske endda et andet menneske, end hende vi kendte som statsminister for 12 år siden?
Interviewet med dig, statsministeren, er før det kommet, og det er super flotte billeder. Den nye regerings 2 powerkvinder deler verden imellem sig.
Lige om lidt får vi også fint besøg af vores nyhedschef her på TV1, Katrine Fønsmark.
Jeg går ud fra, at du skal være jeres Nyborg-ekspert. De har fundet olie i Grønland. Det kan jo blive en klimakatastrofe. Jeg har gået til valg på nogle markante klimamål, og de løfter har ikke tænkt mig at svigte. Og jeg kan ikke have en udenrigsminister, som går solo og fører sin personlige klimapolitik ind. Du er ikke statsminister længere, Birgitte. Kan vi tre ikke lave en aftale om, at hvis I kan mærke, at jeg... så giver mig lige et bræk.
Den aftale.
Tak. Altså, lige nu ser det ud til, at jeg har valget mellem at gå af eller at ændre holdning til olien.
Du tilbyder mig den grønlandske olie for at redde dit politiske liv.
Jeg kunne bare godt tænke mig at vide, hvad du har tænkt dig at sige til dine vælgere.
Du er ikke dig selv, Birgitte.
Jeg tilpasser mig bare forholdene. Ved du, hvem jeg danser med på jeres vegne? USA, Rusland, Kina.
Kina. Lad os ikke i retssætter.
Just make it go away, Birgitte. Er det her arbejde virkelig så vigtigt for dig? Du har allerede været statsminister, og du overlevede det.
Yesterday, Russia violated the sovereignty of Denmark.
Hvad er det, vi har respekt for? Det er dem, der ligger nede i ringen og har blødt, mens der bliver talt henover, men som så rejser sig igen og kæmper videre i næste runde.
Vi står alene på den lille isflage nu. Så kan vi kun håbe på, at lortet det ikke smelter under det.
And this is a very good reason to jump to your next show, Ragnarok. You know,
Yeah.
And, you know, many people would say just growing up story or this type of about Nordic mythology, but actually, what is it all about? You know, maybe you can explain.
Well, it's a coming of age story, and that was actually a very fun thing to write because it is a genre story, more genre than I've been writing for a long time. It is what you call it. The genre is supernatural. And I've been writing. I mean, I grew up in a tradition writing stories like, you know, the one about the taxi company and Nikolaj and Julie, Borgen, Ride Upon the Storm. Ride Upon the Storm had elements of supernatural, but then it's about God. What can be more supernatural? But anyway, so this was a show where we could actually, you know, do amazing stuff because we could have this young kid who discovers that he is in fact maybe the avatar of an old Nordic god, Thor, which is a completely crazy idea. But it was such a joy to write. We are addressing a young audience on Netflix. And we began the show about 5 years ago, and I had some sessions with Netflix, and they said, well, we want a show for young people. It could contain elements of Nordic mythology, and that was about it. That was what they said. And it was in the early days of Netflix in Europe where they would be very ready, you know, to shoot from the hip. If you had an idea and it kind of immediately, they could jump to conclusions and they could jump to a green light extremely quickly. And that gives a project a certain energy, a playful energy, because, you know, it didn't take us that long to dream up this crazy universe. And we basically wanted to pair, you could say, some Nordic realism, that this is actually a small, dark Nordic town, a Norwegian town in the fjords, in the mountains. And it has this, like an old, you know, mining town. It has industry. And we found this amazing place to shoot it that actually has a story exactly like that. So everywhere you see the most beautiful mountains, but you always see them through the smoke of big industrial chimneys. And that gives you a certain feeling that this world is so beautiful and we're destroying it at the same time. So the whole environmental theme came very natural when we saw I got to see the place where we shoot it, the location, the primary location, which is a town called Odda in Norway. And when I saw that one, good Norwegian friends told me about the town, and I went there and I immediately texted our producer and said, "This is amazing. I'm gonna send you 25 pictures, and I know you're gonna hate me for it because you will love what's in those pictures. And I won't tell you how crazy logistics will be in this town. Getting to this place takes so long time. It's going to be very expensive to shoot here because there's no film industry whatsoever, but I think we should try it." And I was so happy that we did.
So only the old Nordic gods can really save us.
Yeah, well, we yeah, you could say that, or maybe young people. So you could also say that the whole God thing is also a symbolic story element, because young people very often believe that they are immortal. You know, they believe that everything is possible, and at the same time, young people today are so steeped in anxiety, and they are so afraid at the same time. So you have this, you know, immense ideals, and oh, I'm in fact an immortal God, I can do everything. Oh, nobody believes in me. So it's like you have this this gap that exists in many lives of young people, and that is very much in the show.
Yeah, very strong characters again, yes.
Yeah, we've done our best to make them, and then again working with young, untrained actors. Some of them had participated in that wonderous, amazing, beautiful show Skam on NRK, the Norwegian show. So they had some training there, but apart from that, they were just young people wanting to explore the world of acting and going into this crazy world that we constructed around them with such enthusiasm, and it has been amazing. We are currently editing the third and last season of Ragnarok.
Shall we watch a little clip of the Ragnarok,
Yeah.
just to remind you what we were talking about?
Du har alltid hatt det inni deg. Jeg har bare åpnet øynene dine.
Ok, først av alt så skal vi hjertelig velkommen to nye klassekamerater. Ja, de er jo brødre. Vil dere si litt om dere selv, gutter?
Jeg har hoppet over noen klassetrinn, og Agne er god til noen andre ting.
Det føles som at alt har forandret seg etter at jeg kom til Edda. Jeg har blitt usårbar.
Her det skjedde. Den siste kampen mellom gudene og jettene. Men hvem var jettene?
Du, han er nygutten i klassen. Jeg vil at dere skal holde øye med han.
Det der er Fjord. Han er en jutul, han går i trea. Alle småjentene er helt gale etter han.
Det er oss som avgjør liv og død.
Skal det ikke være en krig først?
Jettene er her fortsatt. De ødelegger verden. Det er ingen som har tatt opp kampen mot dem. Ennå.
Det er noe sjukt i den byen her.
Hun så noe der oppe, ved breen. Vi er enige om at det ikke har vært en som han på 1000 år.
Ulvene spiser sauene.
Det er ikke som beskytter dem.
Og du skal ikke undervurdere ham. Hvem er du? Heltens reise har begynt.
But what inspires you today? What is next on the table?
Well, the thing is that it's always secret what we do until it's announced, you know.
Well, we don't record here.
But yes, I'm writing currently on a new show in a completely different setting than any of these, and I'm also writing on a feature film. So that is that, and I don't think I can say more than that because it's still very secret and it's not announced, and I'm not allowed to. And they will probably they would either kill me or I will have to kill all of you. Yeah.
Well, we are okay to wait. I'm pretty sure it's going to be something
Looking
big
forward anyway.
theme again. But please, let's go to the questions from the audience. Well, we can't see you really.
No, we can't really see you. I don't know if you can put on some more light in the room, maybe, because then we can see you. You are just, you're a dark mass.
There is a question already.
So just to ask you, when you mentioned Right Upon the Storm and the going into this religious story, what did you self get out of it in the end?
Well, I mean, I was completely absorbed in religion for 2-3 years writing that show. And I must say, I started an atheist. I ended an atheist. So I've never actually, but I think I very much believe that you can be an atheist and still be a spiritual human being. I do believe that there are elements to the human character that is not necessarily the substance of science always. I do believe in the power of the human soul. I just don't believe in a personal God that created everything in a split of a second. I'm also a huge fan of science, and I find the scientific descriptions of how our universe came to be so much more powerful, actually, than those very old stories about "Let there be light." That I don't think it's. I think science is more exciting, actually. I have to say. But then again, I'm an atheist. I still am an atheist, but I have the greatest admiration for people of faith, and I do both admire and sometimes almost envy the feeling of the strong feeling of calmness that they can sometimes just have about them, because they just know how this has begun. They know that every story has a beginning and a middle and an end, and it's writing, and it's been written for them by a force they believe in. And I'm sure that all of us that are possibly atheists or anything in between, everything is so fluid to us, the universe and everything we believe in. It's just so, everything is moving and we don't really have anything to grasp onto. We are just like refugees in an ocean. And I would sometimes, want to have that calmness. But I guess I'm just out there in that water trying to survive another day.
Any other question? And Piret?
Hello, I'm Piret. Thank you for the very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much.
I would like to know, do you still write in the writing room, or you are all by yourself and creating alone?
Well, I'm not necessarily always writing in a room like the rooms I was trained to work in. But I do very much believe in the creative process between more people than just yourself. So I will never work. I can sometimes write on my own if I have made, either a treatment or a sequence of scenes together with someone else. But I do very much love the energy of a writer's room with 2, 3, 4 people, not too big rooms. I've never ever worked in rooms like the Americans often do that was maybe also in the older days, but you could have a writer's room with 8, 10, 15 writers. But that is a different way of conceiving a show. I've never tried that in Denmark because we don't have the money for it, basically. So Borgen was between 3 writers, sometimes 4 writers. Right Upon the Storm, 3, maximum 4 writers. I've still the shows I've been writing lately, maybe we've been 3, maybe sometimes only 2 writers, but I very much like to conceive ideas in a room full of vibrant dialogue, where you can actually say, hey, I think, could this be a good idea? And you immediately get a response. I very much like that. And it is, I mean, writing drama is a collective process, is something we do together. And I think that is super important. And it is something we do, basically, we try to refine our art in a spirit of good-natured criticism. We get notes. We always get notes. You write a script, you get notes. You write a new script, you get new notes. And you hope for less notes every time. But then again, one day it will be shot or it will be trashed. And if it's shot, then you give notes to the director, not necessarily the actors, but to the director. And in the editing room, you receive notes again from the streamer or the broadcasting service that you're working for. Basically, we should get we should find some good calm, creative calm in the fact that this art form is something we do together. And if we don't like that spirit of criticism, we should become novel writers instead, because screenwriters, they live in a climate of constant criticism, and that's just it. We might end bitter, old, and angry for all the notes we got, but hopefully they made us sharper and better.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm Karl. You talked about these early ages when you wrote for TV shows, 2 sketches, 1 song per day, and it was very good training.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask 2 questions, actually. Everything you wrote then, were you, by yourself, were you satisfied what was the results every day?
Not always. And I've certainly also written scenes where, also in later years, where, I mean, basically you want to be able to, you want to be as good as in your craft, to retain a certain minimum of quality, that you will never go below that. It's sometimes when you strike that amazing tone that you didn't know you even had in you, that will make you sometimes famous, or something that you made will be really cheered by people. But I think you need, as a working screenwriter, that basically turns in scripts and to live of your art or your craft, basically. You need to find that minimum. And you will often write things that you, maybe on your best of days, you could have done better, or anyway differently. But you still say, well, this is a fair way of treating this scene, and I can live with the result. And you can also see things you've done that were very youthful, and maybe they were full of mistakes, but then they might have this certain youthful energy that you've maybe lost along the way. So it's every age of you, every stage of you as a writer has special energies and qualities, and I think you need to basically be happy with that. My advice to all writers is always write as much as you possibly can. And I've been very lucky, and I've been very happy for basically a career that gave me possibilities to write in many genres. And I didn't know I would end here in this chair talking about TV series that I'd made, because I basically wrote what was there. I mean, if someone had called me and said, hey, do you want to write stupid things for a TV show that nobody really watches, if it paid my basically paid my rent, I would write it when I was very young. And it made me, I'm sure, better. It trained me as a writer. And I would advise anybody to write as much as possible.
Okay. And the second question is that I guess these these periods when you have to deliver,
yeah,
you just have to deliver. It's pretty stressful. And if you are looking back now, more experienced, developed, older, and so on. If you look back to this period, have you analyzed and can you bring out what kind of inner skills or power or what brought you through this on these times when it was stressful? Because we all know that stress is a very good killer of creative and motivation and creative writing. What exactly you used to come through?
Well, I actually think that that team writing can save the day sometimes, because you share blame and guilt with other people for writing so terribly. But actually, it is nice to be able to discuss with people. I've also worked as a journalist writing for a paper, and you're all alone there. You sit there, you know, you have a deadline in 3 hours. Now it's 2 hours. Now it's bloody. You have only 30 minutes to finish this, and you are really in there. It's nice to be together with 2 or 3 people and be able to say, hey, this scene is not good enough. They've given us these notes. Let's just try to throw it up in the air and see what comes down. It's nice to have that room full of words, dialogue, and actually be able to throw ideas at each other. So I think even though it can be sometimes stressful also to work everything out in groups, because you have to end up with a result that everybody doesn't hate, you know, or hate it equally much. But still, you have that energy together, and it really pays off, I think. Sometimes just basically to say to your colleagues, hey, this scene, when they read it, it sounded like shit. We all loved it when we wrote it, but now we have to do it all over again. What should we do? It's nice to be more than one in those moments.
Next.
Hello, my name is Krismar. First of all, I think that you also predicted Estonian politics, since we have a female prime minister. But you were saying that actually, like, you wrote Guns Blazing. Of course, you had to work with other creatives because it's a collective art. But they used to say that never talk about politics and religion, and you made series about that. And it's like, how do you keep writing Guns Blazing when you have media, when audience or people see in your series something that actually you didn't meant, or actually is not you? How do you? And my second question is, like, I guess, like, you can do you research, because we can see politicians, we can see media, but you were talking about bureaucrats. Did you walk into some Danish Ministry of Culture and learn their dialogues, or how did you do that? So those are my 2 questions.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I tried to say in the beginning is also to write about something that really stirs your own mind, that really is of great interest to you. Because you will, as a young staff writer, you will sometimes get a job writing on a show that you don't necessarily love, maybe, and about topics that you wouldn't have written that show, but now you're there, you're the staff writer, you're supposed to turn in a script, and that is good training as well. I mean, just basically getting to pay your rent with the money you earn by writing scripts, and sometimes it's not the greatest script you will ever write, but you still do a good job. And that is basically what people, when they call you back and ask you back, it's because you have that minimum, basically, that you never go below that line of quality. When it comes to quality, when it comes to research, I think it's almost impossible to research too much. I don't think you can. I think it's all important, and I've really been studying politicians and civil servants, and I've been following politicians during their day. Our actors also did that, basically also writing, and also doing this new season of Borgen. Had a huge research group sitting, and I could at all times open the door and basically say, drones. I need to know everything about drones. Close the door. Right. Oh my God. I need to know everything about American foreign politics in the late 80s. Please find out what were the main agendas. And it's just, it's such a privilege when you have a show that's running and you just have people sitting there to make you as clever as you can possibly be. And I really have to applaud these people, because I'm not that clever. They are, and we are together. But I think research is just super important. And I will quote one of the old masters that some of you will know, Robert McKee, who's of course one of the oldest gurus in the craft. But he writes somewhere that if you don't do your research properly, if you don't know the world of your characters, he says, you will end up writing cliché. And I think that is very true, because if I didn't know what it's like to be a foreign minister, or if I didn't know, if I'm writing a story about a butcher, if I'm writing a story about a racing driver, if I don't know exactly how it is to be a racing driver, I will write cliches. I will write what I think it's like to be a racing driver or a butcher or a priest or whatever. And I don't really know. And the beauty of it is, and I'm actually writing a project. I can't tell you about that project, but I can still say that I'm researching at the moment. And research gives you so many gifts. And I'm talking about really story elements. I'm talking new turning points in stories, because all of a sudden you say, oh, hey, that's the way a politician usually gets his or her information from certain journalists. Oh, I want to throw in a scene like that. Or, oh, that's how a racing driver gets appointed to a new team or something. There's so many gifts in research, and I can't applaud good research enough.
I can ask.
Hey.
Thank you for the lovely conversation. My question is more about working with broadcasters and then, big streamers, like especially with Borgen, because first you had it with the national
DR and then
Netflix. So are there any major differences in that?
Well, the interesting thing about Borgen was actually that because, and I think I said that DR, the Danish National Broadcasting Service, they hold the format rights. And therefore, they decided that every single script note, every single note to Borgen, either in script or in the editing room, would only be given by them. And Netflix actually agreed to that, which is quite amazing, because they paid more than their share, I would say. But Netflix actually said, it's fine, you take it. And I think it's also because of their local production policy, that basically they say if they find a show that works very well in Denmark or in Sweden or in Norway, who are they to tell the people that actually made the show originally, and the people that hold the show near and dear to them and know everything about the show? Who are they to tell these people how to do the show? They actually said that to me in that very same wording. So I never got notes from Netflix. I actually got notes in the same way I would have gotten notes in the old days of Borgen, the first 3 seasons that were written for DR and produced by DR. So exactly the same way. But I've worked for Netflix with other shows like Ragnarok, for example, and I don't really think the notes sessions are much different, actually. Maybe I was just lucky. Maybe I'm an old, worn, and hopefully experienced writer, so they wouldn't try to push me too much around. But still, I think they just gave the notes they felt for. And I don't think there's so many strange rumors sometimes flying around about big streaming services that they are trying to impose American storytelling, and they're trying to... I've never really experienced that. I mean, maybe it's because I've mainly written local Nordic shows for Netflix, that they never came and said, well, please make this show more American. It will also be weird, because if you have a business plan that you want to be successful in the local market, why would you want to destroy that business model by making the show less Nordic, less local, and trying to impose American ideas on the script? I just don't think it would work, and I've never experienced them doing that. If you write a youth-orientated show like Ragnarok is, they would have questions about smoking, for example, and sometimes that your ideas, your characters are role models to some young people, so they would question certain acts. But then if you say, well, it's in his character, he is, therefore he will be smoking, or therefore she will kill this person, or whatever, they would say, all right, it's in the story, you have made it understandable for us, please do. So I've only experienced, I think, one time where I felt that notes were a bit strange, maybe, but then I understood later on that they had a certain tragic event about a show that described, I think, suicide among young people. And therefore they would be very, very, very attentive and very careful about showing anything that could inspire young people to ever harm themselves or even commit suicide. And I understand that, and it was not a huge thing. It was basically, so basically I think the notes have been given by a company like Netflix very much like the notes I would have been given by DR or TV2 or any other big streamer. I've never met the extreme notes that are very born out of an American tradition or anything. I haven't really experienced that. Of course, they are looking at representation, and they're looking at questions of sex and race and where they have very strong values. But I think those values are good to look at. So we would be looking at them anyway. And also, if we had worked for DR, we would ask ourselves, when we are saying two doctors are walking down the street, do they have to be men? No, they are most certainly women. How are we portraying a culturally mixed society? And we should always be aware of doing that in the most sensible way. So I think Netflix is all for that, but other broadcasters and streamers would be for that as well.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, or we are going to discuss how to make the best Bernice sauce with Adam?
Exactly. Fresh eggs.
One more. Oh, is this a secret? One more question? Anybody? No, so
the secret around making a Bernaise is actually the same about writing a script. It's to respect your ingredients and not be afraid at the same time.
With this good advice. Thank you very much, Adam, again to come here, and thank you, European Writers Club, for allowing this open club to happen and Estonian writers to enjoy it. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam.